Okay, in this section, we're going to multiply matrices. Now, unfortunately, multiplying matrices is not as easy as adding and subtracting. You do not just multiply corresponding parts. A lot of people make that mistake, so please don't do that. Multiplying matrices. Matrix A, or matrices A and B, can be multiplied if and only if the number of columns in A is equal to the number of rows in B. And I'll show you a little trick in just a second how you can remember that. Next up, if matrix A has dimensions m by n and matrix B has dimensions n by p, then the resulting dimensions, when you multiply the two together, you're going to get an m by p matrix. So here's how you remember it. Here's my two matrices. First off, if I'm multiplying A times B, matrix A times matrix B, here's how to tell, can you multiply them? These two middle numbers has to be the same. Once you multiply them, what you're left with, this and this, is the dimensions of what your answer will be. So therefore, here's an example. If you multiply a 2 by 3 matrix by a 3 by 4 matrix, can they multiply? Check and see if the middle numbers are the same. You can multiply. Once you do multiply them, your answer will be a 2 by 4. Can you do that backwards? Could you multiply a 3 by 4 times a 2 by 3? Are the middle numbers the same? No, they are not. So therefore, you can't multiply them. So that alone shows you matrix multiplication is not commutative. Order is important. So let's try this. Use the matrices to the left. Determine if the product is defined, or can you multiply? If yes, then give the dimensions of the resulting product. So number one says we're going to multiply A times D. So here's matrix A. Matrix A is a 4 by 3. We're going to multiply that by matrix D, which is a 3 by 1. So step number one, can we multiply them? Yes. And our answer will be a 4 by 1. A times C. Matrix A, again, is a 4 by 3. Matrix C is a 2 by 4. Can these two matrices be multiplied? No, they cannot, because those middle numbers are not the same. Number three, a B times E. So B is a 1 by 5, and E is a 5 by 2. Has 5 rows and 2 columns. Can you multiply them? Yes, because the middle numbers are the same. And when you multiply them, what type or what size matrix will you get? You'll get a 1 by 2. Number 4, B times D. Here's B and here's D. B is a 1 by 5. D is a 3 by 1. Can these two be multiplied? No, they cannot. Number 5, C times A. C is right here. It's a 2 by 4. And A is a 4 by 3. Can you multiply them? Yes. How big is the answer? 2 by 3. E times C. Here's C and here's E. The order does matter. Do E first. E is a 5 by 2. C is a 2 by 4. The middle numbers are the same, so therefore, yes, you can multiply them. Your answer is going to be a 5 by 4. Number 7, E times B. So there's E down there. Here's B. E was a 5 by 2. B is a 1 by 5. So therefore, you cannot multiply those. The middle numbers are not the same. And then finally, D times B. D is a 3 by 1. B is a 1 by 5. They can be multiplied, yes, and your answer is going to be a 3 by 5. Okay, next up, let's actually talk about the process. How do you multiply matrices? The element in the mth row and nth column of a matrix AB is the sum of the products of the corresponding elements in row M of matrix A and row column N of matrix B. Show this pattern below. So now that sounds really confusing. So here's how I like to remember it. You always multiply row times column. And what I like to do is, if we're going to multiply A times B, I like to separate matrix A into rows, and I like to separate matrix B into columns. And here is how you multiply. A times B. You're going to take, and let's start with our first row and our first column. And that's going to give me my answer that's in the first row, first column over here. You multiply this row times this column. You pair up the elements. Pair up A with E and B with G. First element with first element, second with second. You're going to multiply and add. You're going to multiply A times E. You're going to multiply B times G, and you're going to add the two together. And that's going to give you your answer in the first row, first column. Then what do? You move on to the first row and second column. That gives you the answer in the first row, second column of your answer. So pair them up again. First with first, second with second, A with F, B with H. You're going to multiply A times F. You're going to multiply B with H, and you again just add those two answers together. And that's going to be the first row, second column answer. We're done with our first row because we've multiplied the first row times everything. So now what do? We move on to the second row. And your answers will go down here in the second row. So let's multiply our second row by our first column. And again, that gives me the answer in the second row, first column. Pair them. Pair C and D with E and G. C with E, D with G. Multiply C with E. Multiply D with G and add the answers. Then once you finish that, then we move on to the second row and second column. Pair them. C, let me try that again. C and D with F and H. C with F, D with H, and then you add them. So we had a 2 by 2 times a 2 by 2. We can multiply them, and our answer is going to be a 2 by 2. So now let's try this firsthand. This is a 2 by 2, and we're multiplying by a 2 by 2. We can multiply them, and our answer should be a 2 by 2. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw a 2-rowed matrix. So we start with our first row, and we're going to multiply this first row by the first column. Pair up the -4 and the -9 with the 6 and the -5. Multiply the corresponding first element with first, second with second, and add the answers. -4 with 6 gives you a -24, plus -9 with -5 gives you a 45. We're done with that column. So now we move on to the second column. First row still, second column. Pair up the first with first, second with second. -4 with -1 gives you 4, plus -9 with +4 gives you a -36. And we'll clean this up in just a second. We're done with our first row, so now let's move on to our second row. Second row, first column, 3 with 6, -5 with -2. 3 with 6 gives you 18. -2 with -5 gives you 10. Second row, second column, 3 with -1. -2 with a +4, so that's going to be plus -8, and then simple cleanup. That gives you 21, -32, 28, and -11. There's your final answer. Number 10. It's also a 2 by 2 times a 2 by 2, so they can be multiplied. We're going to multiply rows by columns. Start with your first row. Pair it first with your first column. That's going to give us our answer in the first row, first column of the answer. -2 with 8, plus 0 with -2. You're done with first column. Move on to the second column. -2 with -3, 0 with -9. We're done, complete with our first row. Let's do the same thing with our second row. And put your answers in the second row. 6 with 8 gives you 48, plus 4 with -2 gives you a -8. Move on to the second column. 6 with -3 is -18, plus 4 with -9 is a -36. Clean up and you are finished. -16 and 0, 6 and 0, -48 and 48 and -8 is 40, and then -18 and -36 is a -54. Number 11, first check and see, can it be multiplied? This is a 2 by 3 and a 3 by 1. The middle numbers match up. They can be multiplied. Your answer should be a 2 by 1. So I'm going to prepare 2 rows. Start with your, rows by columns. Start with your first row. Multiply it by your first column. And that's the only column you have. So again, match up the elements. First with first, second with second, third with third. -7 with 6 gives you 42 plus. 2 with 4 gives you 8 plus. -11 with 3, -3 gives you 33. We're done with the first row. There's no more columns, so move on to the second row and do the same thing. Second row times first column will give you your answer in the second row, first column. Pair them up. 3 with -6, -5 with 4. That'd be plus -20. And then plus -2 with -3 gives you 6. Final answer, 42 and 8 is 50, plus 33 is 83. And then -38 plus 6 is a -32. 2 rows, 1 column. Number 12, can they be multiplied? This is a 1 by 2, and you're multiplying by 2 by 4. Middle numbers are the same, so yes, they can, and you should get a 1 by 4 as an answer. So you're only going to have 1 row in your answer. So let's take our first row, and we're going to multiply it by each column. First row, first column. 2 with 3 plus -8 with -2 gives you 6 and 16. We're done with the first column. Move on to the second. 2 with 10 plus -8 with -7 gives you that. Third column. 2 with -4 gives you -8 plus -8 with 5 gives you a -40. And then our last column, 2 with -3 gives you a -6 plus -8 with -6 gives you a 48. Clean that up. 6 and 16 is 22. 20 and 56 is 76. -8, -40 is -48. -6 and 48 gives you 42. 1 row, 4 columns. Number 13, you have a 2 by 2 multiplied by a 2 by 3. Can be multiplied. Answer will be a 2 by 3. Multiply rows with columns. 9, let's start here. 9 with -3, -5 with 1. Move on to the second column. 9 with 13 plus -5 with -7. Move on to the third column. 9 with -5 plus -5 with 2 gives you -10. You are now done with your first row. Then go to your second row and do the same thing. Pair each piece, each element with each element over here. First with first, second with second. -2 with 3. Notice I'm putting my answers in the second column, or second row. -2 with 3 plus 4 with -1. Second column, -2 with 13 plus 4 with -7. Third column, -2 with -5 plus 4 with 2. Clean up. Gives me -22, 152, -55. There's your first row. 6 with -4 gave you 2, -54, and 18. There's your answer. Okay, number 14, you have a 3 by 1 multiplied with a 1 by 3. Can be multiplied, and your answer actually should be a 3 by 3. Now, how are we going to get that? We're going to multiply each row with each column. Well, each one of these only has 1 number in them. So you're going to take your first row and multiply it by your first column, and that's it. First row by the second column gives you the answer in the first row, second column. So 14 times 9, that'll be 126. And then first row, third column gives you 70. You are done with your first row. Do the same thing with your second row, gives you a 2, a -18, and a -10. Done with the second row, do the same thing with the third row, gives you a 6, -54, and -30. There's your final answer. Okay, number 15, you have a 2 by 3 multiplied by a 3 by 2. Can be multiplied. Your answer should be a 2 by 2. So let's see if we can start doing this more so in our head. So you're going to multiply 2, -8, -1 by 0, -2, and 6. That's going to give you 0, 16, and -6. 0, 16, and -6 gives you 10. Move on to the second column. First row, second column. 2, -8, -1 with these 3 numbers. 2 with 7 is 14, -88, and 5, which gives you a negative 69. We're done with our first row. Now let's move on to our second row. 15 with 0, negative 3 with negative 2, 4 with 6, 15 with 0, that's a 0, a 6, and a 24, which gives you 30. Then move on to your second column, 15 with 7, negative 3 with 11, and 4 with negative 5, 105, a negative 33, and a negative 20 gives you a final answer of 52. And that's it. And then finally, number 16, you have a 1 by 2 and a 2 by 1. So this will multiply together, and your final answer is going to be a 1 by 1. So you multiply each row by each column where there's only 1. Negative 7 will pair with 16, and that's going to give you negative 112. Plus negative 5 with negative 1 gives you a 5. So the only element is a negative 107. So it's a 1 by 1 matrix with only one element in it. Okay, number 17. Number 17 says, given matrix A and B, which is listed to the left, find AB and find BA. So A times B is going to be this. And when you multiply those together, that's a 2 by 2 times a 2 by 2, which is legal. So we multiply rows times columns, and that's going to give me, let's see, a negative 6 and a negative 7, which is negative 13. First row, second column would be a 30 minus 6, which is 24. Move on to the second row, 4 with negative 2 and 8 with 7, that's a negative 8, and a 56, which gives you 48. And then second row, second column is 40 and 48, which is 88. So next up, let's find B times A. B times A will be negative 2, 10, 7, 6 times 3, negative 1, 4, and 8. Same thing, rows by columns. Negative 2 with 3, 10 with 4, that's negative 6 and 40. Negative 6 and 40 would be a 34. First row, second column will be a 2 and an 80, which gives you 82. Move on to the second row, 7 with 3, 6 with 4 is a 21 and a 24, which is 45. And then second row, second column is negative 7 and 48, which gives you 41. So what can we conclude from this? Look at your two answers. AB is not the same thing as BA. Matrix multiplication is not commutative, meaning that the order again is important. AB and BA not the same thing, so the matrix multiplication order is important. Okay, now that we see that matrix multiplication is not commutative, let's talk about the other properties. And a lot of the other properties it does follow. The associative property, if you have 2 or 3 matrices, A times B times C, you can multiply in this order, or you can do the B times C first. But notice again, we didn't change the actual order of the matrices. We simply changed the order in which they were multiplied. That is legal. The associative property of scalar multiplication says that you can take a scalar and do it this way. You can multiply the matrices first and then multiply if k is just a number and then multiply it by that number. Or you can multiply k times the matrix and then take that answer and multiply it by b. Or you can change the order of the scalar, like you could take matrix A and multiply it with k times b. But again, notice that A and B, the order of the matrices did not change. Your left distributive property, if you have a matrix times 2 matrices being added, you can multiply A times matrix B and then add A times matrix C. So the distributive property does hold, but again, the order is important. If you're going to do it in this direction, it's A times B and then A times C. And then you have the right distributive property, which what if the A is on the outside over here? Again, notice order is important. We're going to multiply A times both of these, but we're going to do B times A and C times A. Again, order is important. Okay, applications. The first table shows the number of reams of paper, packs of dry erase markers, and boxes of staples requested by 2 teachers. The cost per item is given in the second table. Use matrix multiplication to show the total cost of the supplies. So first off, let's call it matrix S. is going to be this matrix right here. And again, that's all a matrix is simply a spreadsheet. So you have 6, 4, 5, 8, 2, 3. And then we're going to call matrix C the cost of each one. The cost of paper is 15, cost of markers is 4, and the cost of staples is $2.50. Now look what happens when we find matrix S times matrix C. So again, we're going to multiply them together. This is a 3 by 2, or excuse me, that's a 2 by 3, and this is a 3 by 1. So we can multiply them because the middle numbers are the same, and we're going to get a 2 by 1. And look what happens when we multiply these. We're going to multiply rows by columns. We're going to pair up this with this, which is, again, how much paper Miss Smith requested, and this is the price of the paper. Pair up this, which is the number of markers she needed, with the price of the markers, and this is the number of staples she needed with the price of the staples. So you do 6 times 15 plus 4 times 4 plus 5 times 2.5, and you get 118.50. And then do the same thing. Let's move on to the second row. Multiply the second row by the first column. 8 times 15 plus 2 times 4 plus 3 times 2.5 gives you 135.50. Now, what do those two numbers represent? The first one we did the first row times the first column. That is the total cost of Miss Smith's supplies. And when you did the second row times the first column, this would be the total cost of Miss Will's supplies. The next one says used for questions 19 through 22. The students at Oak Hill High School are selling bags of popcorn, $10 each, tubs of cookies, 12, and baskets of fruit for 16 to raise money for the school. The number of each item per class is shown below. If they earn 15% profit off each item they sell, use matrix multiplication to show the profit that they're going to earn by each class. Give your answers as a matrix. So let's start out by creating a matrix that represents what each class sold. So the freshman class sold 60 popcorn, 84 cookie dough, and 45 fruit basket. And let's continue on and finish out this matrix. So there's the matrix representing what each class sold. Now they're going to earn, let's go back and look at it, 15% profit for each item that they sold. So off of the popcorn, they're going to earn $1.50. Off of the cookie dough, they're going to earn 15% of 12, which I think is $1.80. And then off of the fruit baskets, or off the basket, fruit baskets, they earn 15% of 16, which is $2.40. So what we're going to do to see what each class is going to earn, we're going to take those three amounts. Again, I said $1.50 for each popcorn, $1.80 for each tub of cookie dough, and $2.40 for each fruit basket. And we're going to multiply it by our matrix. And again, when we do the row by column, we have this 3 by 3 by the 3 by 1. We're going to end up with a 3 by 1 answer. And look, I'm just going to do the first one just to show you. Look how it lines up. Row by column, we've got popcorn is multiplied by the amount they're going to earn for popcorn. The cookie dough is going to be multiplied by the amount they're going to earn for cookie dough. And the fruit baskets, number of fruit baskets, is going to be multiplied by how much they're getting per fruit basket. So we're going to do 60 times $1.50, 84 times $1.80, 45 times $2.40. Add the answers together, and here's what you get. $349.20. Do the same thing for the sophomore class here. Multiply each item here by each item here, and you get $284.10. Multiply the third row by the only column, and you get $216.60. And then the last row times the only column gives you $297.90. So again, in our resultant matrix here, here's how much the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors earn. So which class earned the most profit? That would be right here. That'd be the freshman class. Give the total profit of the school. So all we have to do is add these this all the items in this column together, and that gives you $1147.80, $1,147.80. How much more profit did the seniors earn than the juniors? So subtract those two items, and I believe you get $81.30.